Welcome to JP SharePoint. This is part of a workflow series on SharePoint Visual Studio 2013. Let's get started. First, what you see before you is a SharePoint site with a test list that's been added. And the test list has just two columns, which is a title, a first name, and I went ahead and modified the view and put the created by there. So this is a list that we will use to go into our workflows. Now in 2013, the Workflow Manager takes over from what it had before in 2010 and before. So that has to be configured as a website and added to SharePoint. And this is another video that we will address at some other time, but the scope of that is not here. But it's not that difficult to set up. It's just like a website. And once you get that working, you have the option of doing Visual Studio workflows or SharePoint Designer workflows. And it's very important that you have the 2013 Workflow Manager installed. With that, I will switch over to Visual Studio because this is a Visual Studio workflow. And I'll start from scratch. I will just start from the very beginning, and we have our site, we have our Workflow Manager running on SharePoint 2013 environment. So we'll click File, New. We're going to click an empty SharePoint project. And with that project, we'll go ahead and call this My First Workflow. Okay, I'm going to select OK. Now here, this is the site that I'm deploying it to right here. And you have a choice of sandbox or farm. Now you can go ahead and make it a sandbox because now it's declarative, and you can just go ahead and click Finish. Your site is created, and it has all the framework over here with the site URL. So with that, we'll add a workflow. Go to Add New. We'll say Workflow, and we'll give it a workflow name. Test workflow. Say Add. Now we have this going to a list. In that list, we know what it is, and there's our name, and there's our list. We have to go through this little wizard to make it all connected. And what we're doing is we're associating it right here with a workflow. So there's our test list right there. And we're going to go ahead and create a new history. I'm going to create a new task list and say Next. Okay, we'll start this workflow automatically when something is added, and we'll leave those others. Now, SharePoint, it all gets connected. Visual Studio does a lot of good work for us. First rule of thumb, it gives you a nice panel here, and over here you got the toolbar that has all these things, a very rich host of workflow tools over here. Way better than what we had in the past. And even though it is declarative, it seems like codish as you get into it because it has variables and strings and those kinds of things. So right here you have features, and you have actually two of them, and you're like, well, why is there two? Well, the reason is because you have a history list and a task list, and also the workflow feature, all items all in one, or separated out, I should say. So if you look at the other one, you'll see that it's reversed. So what we can do, we can just go ahead and combine these. So let's rename this first one to something And what you can do is just right click the feature, rename, and say my workflow, my workflow spell feature. Okay, and then what we can do is go into that workflow. Again, we'll take this one and this one. Just go ahead and move them all over, and we'll save that. And then we have that one right here that has everything in it. We'll go up to here and we'll just delete this one. Just click on it and say delete. Now you have your workflow, and these will be deployed with features, with the feature. And you can also rename the feature right there. My first workflow feature, I usually just take the one off of that. Hit save. I'm going to close that out. Now we're at the XAML file, and so this right here, you can see that it's like, you know, building a GUI. What kind of code is this? Well, it does get quite complicated, and I'm kind of glad we have a GUI. It does hurt your head if you do it the code way. So some of us are used to that, and some of us kind of like this here. So with that being said, you have this toolbar over here, and what you can do with a toolbar, instead of that whole list of items that you have, you can go ahead and just search. So we know we want to write to history, so start typing right, and it shows right up. Click on it, drag it right in the center, voila. And to get this back to, you know, the toolbar back, just take it out and you'll see all these wonderful things. So we click on the history, and we have these little bitty bars right here. These kind of like our errors. And so you click on history, you know there's something to be added to it. So something has to be added. So you go over here to your properties panel, and this is where a lot of work is done. Select this three little elliptical thing, and now what you want to do is you want to put a string in here. You can also put variables, but we don't have any variables made. So let's just put a workflow started. And again, I'm putting it in quotes. It has to be in quotes. You will get an error. Now you notice those two little things went away. And I always get in the habit of saying save all the time, because sometimes just things happen. It's the IT world. So that being said, you now have a world of lots of like methods and things that you can call on the right side to get different things. But you also have arguments and imports down here. One of the main things that you have is variables. And so what we want to do is when we start this workflow, we're going to write to the history of workflow started. And now we want to kind of get the user who started it. So how do we do that? Well, first thing we need to do is create two variables for this. And one variable, you just click on variables and click in that area, and you can the variable be, say, like a list properties. And with list properties, because it's actually a list property, it's a value, we have to go to the variable type, and we have to actually go to this browse for types. And I know that it's a Microsoft activity, and it's a dynamic value. So you want to select dynamic value right here and say OK. So that's going to get the dynamic value and put it into list properties. And we'll get to that in just a few minutes. So the second variable we're going to make is we want the list author. And the list author, we're just going to leave as a string. And these two leave just the sequence and scope and default. Okay? Okay, so let me switch back. We have the list properties, the list author. And at this point in time, we need to figure out how we're going to get those values and how we're going to use those values. Well, over on the left-hand side, you have all your tools, and your tools are just about to do just about anything you want to. So we want to look up a list. So let's go look up. Type in lookup, and we want to look up a list item. So let's click on look up a list item. Let's drag it right below the history and let it be placed there. Now, once it's there, we have our errors again because something needs to be configured, and you can see it on the right hand side under properties. You can see you've got to configure some things. Well, the item ID, you select that drop down and you can go current item. The list ID, we want the current list. Now the result, we want the result to go into list properties. Okay? And then we got our errors taken care of. Okay, but we still need to do some things. We need to get the properties. So click on Get Properties. And you can see right here we have List Properties as a source. And then click on this Define. And once you click on the Define, you'll have this little Properties box come up. And drop it down and look for your list. Your list, our list is right here, the test list. And want the test list, and then we'll click right in our properties. And now we're going to look for all the properties are here. Let's look for created by. There it is. Now I want created by to go into something, and that's why we created that other variable. So if you start typing what that variable is called, it has a nice little thing here. You can just say list author and say OK. We go ahead and select the variable so you have more real estate to look at. And go ahead and click Save. Okay. Now we've completed the workflow history. We looked up an item and we placed that item into a dynamic value. So what we'll do right here is we'll build and we'll deploy. Okay, deploy started, adding solution, and we're going to go ahead and hit resolve. It's just going to say in there, it's going to write over the list. I've done that once before. So adding solution, it's going to activate the features. Deploy succeeded. Okay. We'll come over to SharePoint, and we'll go to SharePoint Lists, Libraries, Workflow Settings right here, and we'll click Workflow Settings, and you'll see there's our test item added right there. Okay. So let's go back to our test list. Add a new item. My name is Joe. So what we need to do is we need to go to the site contents and look up the new workflow history list and the workflow task list. Well, there's no task, so but there will be a history. So we click on the history list after refresh, and you'll see right over here under the description. It says workflow started. Again, we got the username, and we haven't done anything with that value yet, but that will be on the next videos. We'll continue this. So thank you for watching. This is JP SharePoint.